The U.S. China trade war enters nuclear collision mode. On October 10th, Trump blasted on social media, "Something very strange is happening in China." From blocking Nvidia and Qualcomm to imposing fees on U.S. flights and ships, Beijing's economic retaliation is escalating across the board. But the truth behind it is this: China's domestic economy has already collapsed. The Golden Week travel season turned into a Golden Week, homestays bled money, and price wars were brutal. This rare earth offensive isn't just external provocation, it's the regime's last gasp amid an internal economic blackout. Don't miss the next drop, subscribe and enable the bell. The CCP is truly playing with fire this time. On October 10th, Trump posted a lengthy message on Truth Social: "Something very strange is happening in China, they have become very hostile." He was referring to Beijing's abrupt announcement of a sweeping rare earth blockade. Note, it's not only made in China that gets caught. If your product contains 0.1% Chinese rare earths, it still gets choked off. This is an unprecedented economic nuclear war, holding the global AI chip chain hostage and gripping the throat of world manufacturing. Even heavier was Trump's line: "This may be painful, but it will be good for America." Translation: Full U.S. China decoupling, the countdown has begun. Rare earth blockade equals economic nuke. On October 10th, the new rare earth rules took effect, regardless of where it's manufactured. As long as China-produced rare earth content accounts for 0.1% or more, you must obtain CCP approval. Reality check: roughly 90% of the world's rare earth materials have long relied on China. And what are rare earths? Phones, computers, data centers, AI training, cars, solar panels, and even the equipment that makes chips, all need them. In a word, whoever controls rare earths can slow the clock of the global economy. As Beijing unilaterally ignited a new round of trade war, Trump fumed: "I had planned to meet President Xi 2 weeks from now during APEC in Korea, but there is no reason to do so." In Trump's view, the timing of the rare earth ban was especially inappropriate. That same day, the Middle East, after 3,000 years of turmoil and wars, was welcoming a window of peace. Coincidence? Apparently not. Rather, a long-plotted plan for Beijing to hold the world hostage with rare earths, malicious intent, naked hostility, and like nothing seen before. This will clog global markets, and no country will be spared. China itself will suffer. Trump wrote, "I never thought it would come to this, but perhaps, as with all things, the time has come." Ultimately, although it may cause pain, this will be very good for America. One policy we are considering is to substantially raise tariffs on Chinese goods entering the United States. Many other countermeasures are also under serious consideration. Trump pointed out that other countries have contacted Washington to express dissatisfaction with China's display of extreme trade hostility, saying this hostility appeared without warning. Retaliation escalates on all fronts. After opening a formal probe into Nvidia, on October 10, China's State Administration for Market Regulation, SAMR, announced a case against U.S. chip designer Qualcomm, citing an antitrust investigation tied to Qualcomm's acquisition of Israeli V2X chipmaker Autotalks, allegedly in violation of China's anti-monopoly law. Back in 2013, Beijing launched a case against Qualcomm and in 2015 ruled that Qualcomm abused dominance in patent licensing and fees to device makers, slapping a record $975 million fine under China's antitrust regime. Following the new probe's disclosure, Qualcomm's shares fell nearly 4% in pre-market trading. Prior to this, on December 9, 2024, SAMR announced a formal case against Nvidia for suspected violations of the anti-monopoly law and conditions attached to its earlier Mellanox acquisition approval. On September 15, SAMR further stated that an initial inquiry found Nvidia violated antitrust rules and decided to investigate further. That coincided with the fourth round of U.S. China economic talks in Madrid. Experts said it was a textbook example of Beijing using domestic regulatory tools as leverage in international disputes. At the same time, China's Ministry of Transport said it would impose special port fees on ships of U.S. enterprises, organizations, and individuals. Any vessel calling at a Chinese port that flies the U.S. flag or is 25% or more owned by a U.S. company will be charged a special port fee, framed as a reciprocal response to Trump-era fees on Chinese vessels. From sea to sky, retaliation widens. China's Ministry of Transport said Friday that starting October 14, such ships calling at Chinese ports will be charged 400 yuan per net ton, about $56 US. From April 17, 2026, the fee rises to 640 yuan from April 17, 2027 to 880 yuan, and from April 17, 2028 to 1,120 yuan. Bloomberg reported on October 10 that, according to people familiar with the matter, the U.S. government is considering whether to issue a preliminary determination finding TP-Link a national security threat. Last year, the U.S. began investigating TP-Link's ties to China. Due to its links to Beijing, TP-Link is facing increasing scrutiny in Washington. After a series of attacks on its routers, lawmakers from both parties voiced concerns that its wireless devices could be infiltrated by Chinese hackers. In May, more than a dozen Republican lawmakers, including Senate Intelligence Committee member Tom Cotton, called for halting further sales of TP-Link products in the U.S. According to Bloomberg, TP-Link originated in China nearly 30 years ago, but last year the Chinese airlines by barring China-U.S. flights from using Russian airspace. The proposal could affect flights to the U.S. by Air China, China Eastern, Xiamen Airlines, and China Southern. The Wall Street Journal, this is economic nuclear war. On October 10, the Wall Street Journal reported that China's latest restrictions on rare earth materials are unprecedented, could disrupt the global economy, mark an escalation in the U.S.-China trade war, and threaten semiconductor supply chains. Chips are the economy's lifeblood. They power phones, computers, and data centers needed to train AI models and affect automobiles, solar panels, and the equipment used to make chips and other products, limiting countries' ability to support their domestic industries. Under the new rule, if a global company sells a product in which certain rare earth materials sourced from China account for 0.1% or more of product value, it must obtain approval from Beijing. Industry experts say tech companies will likely find it extremely difficult to prove that the value of rare earth materials in their chips, chip-making equipment, and other components falls below the 0.1% threshold. Dean Ball, a senior fellow at the Foundation for American Innovation, said, "These rare earth minerals and the ability to refine them are the basis of modern civilization. If Beijing aggressively enforces these rules, it could trigger a global recession." The U.S. and other countries are pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into data centers, making AI a key economic engine. Experts say Beijing seizing control over this choke point could allow it to catch up in the AI race and upend the world order. Dmitry Alperovich, co-founder of the Silverado Policy Accelerator, said, "This is equivalent to an economic nuclear war intended to destroy America's AI industry, calling it a blackmail tactic and predicting Beijing won't fully carry it through." This year, Beijing has repeatedly used rare earths as leverage in trade talks. The April restrictions rattled supply chains and helped push both sides toward a June trade truce. Former U.S. officials and experts suggest the U.S. response could include higher tariffs, further cutting China off from Western semiconductor manufacturing equipment and accelerating domestic rare earth capacity. Semiconductor supply chains are vulnerable to these moves because fabs depend on an ecosystem of specialized equipment suppliers, complex processes, and final packaging firms, coordinated, capital-intensive investments across the U.S., Taiwan, Japan, and the Netherlands. Although both the Trump and Biden administrations have rolled out subsidies and policies to accelerate progress, domestic rare earth capacity in the U.S. remains nascent overall. Thus, rare earths are a real pain point for American AI companies. China's new rare earth controls will add urgency for big tech companies to invest more in these areas. As President Trump put it, this may mean the time has come, and it will be good for America. China's fake prosperity starts to crack. While roiling global manufacturing, China's domestic deflation is worsening. During the National Day Golden Week, China's tourism market staged a brutal price war. On October 9, official data bragged that this year's holiday saw both domestic trip counts and spending hit new highs. But Hong Kong media, after crunching the data, found per capita tourism spending was just 911 yuan, below last year's 916.1 yuan. Daily per capita spending was only 113.9 yuan, down 13% year over year. Mick Scher, founder of Posh Packer Hostels, said, "This year's Golden Week is more like Golden Week." He noted that although his 3 Chengdu hostels finally reached full occupancy, they had to cut room rates by about 60% because surrounding hotels slashed even deeper. Competition is too fierce, good lodging is being dumped at cabbage prices. On Meituan's platform, Chengdu ranked second nationwide in tourism spending, just behind Nanjing. Yet Hostelworld data show average bed prices in Chengdu and Shanghai fell over 20% during the holiday, down to 80.99 yuan and 165.70 yuan, respectively. A Qingdao hotel operator surnamed Wang said that because Mid-Autumn Festival, October 6th, fell within the holiday, the Golden Week was one day longer than previous years, but the real peak ended on the 6th. Thereafter he had to cut prices by 60% as demand cooled. Official figures show that during the holiday alone, domestic tourism revenue rose 15.4% year-over-year, but adjusting for last year's mid-autumn overlap, comparable revenue growth was only 7.6%. A Guangzhou hostel and restaurant owner surnamed Yu said, "Everyone is working harder and spending more, but profits are still thin." His restaurant's daily sales jumped from 3,000 yuan to 10,000 yuan, but per capita spending was just 30 yuan, even with record revenue. "The four of us were exhausted, our celebration was going to sleep." A reporter for the self-media outlet Financial Gossip Girl interviewed multiple hotel/guest house and travel agency owners on October 6th. They unanimously said this year looked lively on the surface, but business relied on heavy discounting to attract customers, leaving them unprofitable or deeply in the red. In Lijiang, Yunnan, long billed as a haven for artsy youth, a guest house owner, alias Abing, sighed, "After tallying the takings, my Lijiang guest house lost big this holiday." He said his property has a prime location. In past holidays, rooms would jump above 1,500 yuan. This year was bleak. Even at 700 yuan, occupancy was miserable. On October 2nd to 3rd he kept above 75%, but after October 4th, occupancy plunged below 30%. While Beijing seeks to replace the U.S. as global hegemon, rare earths, indispensable to chip-making and thus AI, suddenly look like leverage, China controls about 90% of the world's supply, prompting ever tighter controls to try to pinch the world's economic lifeline. But that also blocks its own path forward. President Trump originally hoped to reach a trade deal with Xi, now he's changing course. If tariffs on Chinese goods are raised on top of existing levels, it amounts to a complete economic decoupling. China's economy is highly dependent on the U.S. market. Once decoupled, Beijing's much-touted $3 trillion in foreign reserves will only flow out, not in. The renminbi will become waste paper. A great many exporters and factories have already shuttered. Those that haven't are clinging to hopes of AU.Est, China trade accord, hopes Beijing has now cut off with its own hand. Those business owners who tasted misery over the Golden Week will feel a true, bitter winter in the months ahead.